With us now on this are Dr. Marwa Mazyad and Jason Brodsky. Let me start with you, Marwa. When you hear things like all bets are off, how do you read this?
Well, I read this that there is some regional escalation now, that Iran seems to be advancing in its way towards becoming a threshold nuclear country. And now that there is no deal in place and all of these kind of escalations in this direction, this just necessitates a response from the Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia and UAE and other countries. So I think it's just like an extension of that. It's a response to what's happening on the Iranian side. But I wouldn't read too much into it either, because the statement is providing no details. So we don't want to spin things out of their own control. If Saudi Arabia didn't specify what that means exactly, then we really don't know. But it only means that Saudi Arabia is gonna like this request of from the United States that it would engage in civilian nuclear activities itself. That Saudi Arabia would become engaged with nuclear activities at the civilian level, at least. I think regional countries like Egypt as well are. So I think it's just that it's signaling that the regional countries themselves are responding to what Iran is at this stage.
Jason, what's the message here?
It's great to be with you. I think that Saudi Arabia is making a natural comment because it has seen red line after red line be passed by the Iranian system in its nuclear escalation without any meaningful pushback from the international community. This is why the United States and its European partners need a deterrence strategy of multilateral sanctions, aggressive enforcement, diplomatic isolation, and a credible military threat. And unless and until that happens, we are going to see Iran continuing to test the international community.
Why do the Saudis feel threatened, actually, Marwa?
Oh, because the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran really goes back to the juncture of 1979, once Iran became, if not before that, but once Iran became an Islamic state with expansionary and exporting endeavors, like it wants to expand its revolution throughout the region. So the threat on Saudi Arabia goes back to that juncture, and Saudi Arabia honestly also had to respond by exporting its own version of the Islamic Wahhabism and expanding throughout the region and the world. So I think Saudi Arabia is at a position now that doesn't want to continue with this artificial rivalry anyway, and wants to change its ways, and that's why you see all these developments and changes in Saudi Arabia. So it feels threatened when you have a neighbor like that becomes a nuclear neighbor, and it still wants to pursue expansionist ideological endeavor. So I think the threat is justified. It just depends on the response of the U.S. as an ally to the Gulf countries, and also the regional dynamics themselves. Saudi Arabia is closer to Egypt, UAE, even mended some affairs with Turkey and Qatar. So I think the region has to respond. Israel also is, of course, a factor in all of this.
Yeah, to the point of Israel.
I would say,
I want to touch this point. There's another country, obviously Israel, which is the biggest adversary of Iran. And could that, Jason, let me go to you, could that signal a potential cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Israel in the spirit of, my enemy's enemy is my friend?
Well, I think that this kind of cooperation behind the scenes has been ongoing for some time as a result of both countries' threat perceptions. They have seen the international community really turn a blind eye to Iran's regional aggression for a long time. And now, by the way, the chickens are coming home to roost after warning for years. Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others have been warning about Iran's drone program, its missile program, and now Iran is arming Russia with lethal drones and potentially soon surface-to-surface missiles for use against an EU candidate country, Ukraine. And so this is all painting into a picture of Israel and other U.S. partners in the region saying to the U.S. and its allies, we told you so.
Right. So, Marwa, you see a regional coalition here, possibly including Israel?
Well, there has been exercises ongoing in the Red Sea and even in the Mediterranean between Israel and Egypt and Eastern Mediterranean countries. Saudi Arabia is part of some exercises that took place in the Red Sea. I would say there are already existing security arrangements, but I wouldn't want to push for anything onto Saudi Arabia, as in, like, the talk about former normalization happening anytime soon or such. This is not the position where Saudi Arabia is right now, but that does not deny that there are security arrangement and exercises going on already.
Right. Jason, remember the nuclear talks?
Yes, they are going nowhere, and the Iranians are staying and doing everything to demonstrate that they are really not interested in reviving the JCPOA. And that's why I said earlier, it's time for the United States and its allies to implement a deterrence strategy to get Iran away from advancing its nuclear program even further. As IDF's military intelligence mentioned, it might even enrich a symbolic amount of uranium to 90% weapons grade. And so that's why we need a deterrence strategy.
Right. If things are like that, Marwa, maybe the Saudis should turn to the United States, which they are not doing right now.
Well, I think the United States, it's facing the consequences of having maybe ignored the signals coming from within the region. Saudi Arabia and other regional partners are coming closer to Russia, to China. And I think that's because the United States has not been as responsive over the past few years to the needs of our partners. When Saudi Arabia wants, I want a stronger alliance with the United States that is expressed. Or I want the delivery of the arms that get held, even though the Saudi Arabia pays for.
Marwa, I'll have to stop here because we have to go to a break. Thank you very much, both of you. We'll take a short break.